This is Marshall Shannon with Ministry Design Training and Ministry Design Concepts. I'm a pre-construction navigator, and we prepared this webinar in particular to help you develop a framework or process where you can vet the idea, your intent of planning to build. And so the title of this is Preparing to Build, When Not to Build. When does a church need to delay or delete the idea of planning to add ministry space? And so to begin our conversation, we're going to talk about several different myths of what a building will do for you. These things are not original with me. There are men who came before me. You can learn. I've only been able to find one written book, one resource for you to kind of gather all this in. It's probably time for us to write another book and update it to, the 2012, 2013. And it's a book entitled When Not to Build by Ray Bowman and Eddie Hall. Well, Ray is retired. He's an architect. He is retired. I think Eddie Hall, you can find them on living-stones.org or .com. Ministry, that consulting firm to help. But that's the one book, When Not to Build, An Architect's Unconventional Wisdom for the Growing Church. I'll list this in the resources we'll give you along with this webinar. But they talk about it, they word it differently, but they talk about myths or reasons why a pastor would want to build and what he thinks the building is going to do for them. And so the first one is, if you build it, they will come. And taken from the Kevin Costner film, Field of Dreams. And so for years, and even some of my friends have used this as their tagline for their building project: if they build it, they will come. While that seems like a very good motivation, it is not all the time true. Now, I'm going to give you some statistics that I have collected through hearsay and through different people doing research and so forth over the last 30 years. But it's not a rule. It's not a guarantee. If you build it, they will come. One statistic that was done said that as much as 25 to 37% growth will come to any church who builds on existing property or on new property. So if you add on to your current facilities, or if you buy a new piece of ground and build a new building, your growth would be like that. Another one broke it down into first, second, and third years, and it goes like this. The first year that you build, you'll experience 20 to 25% growth in attendance in that first year. The second year is 15 to 20, and the third year is 10 to 15% growth. So they're saying that you'll grow 50% in the first 3 years just by building a new building. Now, having said that, my personal experience as a senior pastor, where we built 5 times and relocated twice, was that this myth ended up not being a myth for us. Each time we built, we grew. But for me to sit here as a pre-construction navigator and as a ministry coach and tell you just keep adding square footage and keep going into debt to build, that's how you build people and bring them to Christ and build them up in their faith and engage them in serving Christ is wrong. And so the first myth is the idea, well, if you just build it, they'll come. And the second one is, if you build it, they will give. And so some of us, and myself included, have thought, if we give them a designated reason for giving above their regular giving, we will generate the revenue through free will giving that is necessary, and it will be good for the people, and it will be good for the church and the purpose of the church. So we're going to increase their stewardship commitment by brick and mortar, by telling them that we're going to buy land and build, add on to existing facilities. And some people think, well, if we have a building, their giving's going to go up. Well, No, that would be a myth. So if you have an expectation that your building is going to stimulate attendance and growth, or that your building, a new building, is going to increase and stimulate people to give. So if you're expecting growth in giving to increase by this, then I want to tell you that not necessarily. And we'll get to a moment what is the answer. What is going on? The third myth that I want to bring to you, and I'm sure there are others and you can add to this, if you build it, they will serve. And so if you're doing it because you think you're going to grow the church, or you're going to increase the giving, or you're going to be able to engage more people in ministry, that's a myth. I'd have to say that's a myth. People who aren't serving before the building program may still be sitting there. So let me just talk to you quickly about this. And I'm going to give you three stages, the three levels here. The normal rule of thumb by multiple surveys of North American Bible-believing churches is that only 20% of a congregation is actively, consistently engaged in ministry in their church. It has been stated by consultants that they pegged that for order to call your church healthy, if you've ever read anything about natural church development or healthy church development, they'll tell you around 45%. To declare yourself healthy, then 45% of your congregation will be involved, engaged in ministry on a consistent basis, on a regular basis. I would tell you, and it's purely my opinion, and again, I'm picking a number, but I would say if you're going to go into a building program, that's a special project that puts a lot of weight and strain, stress, pressure on your church family, that you want to be in better shape than healthy. You want to have and be fit. So you want to look at your fitness, the condition of your church, to determine if they are ready for this challenge. And you can develop that through any number of ways. But I would say the percentage of people in your church who are actively engaged in ministry needs to be closer to 65% of your congregation involved, engaged in ministry on a regular, continuous basis, week in and week out. So here's the point, and I'm going to say this several times. Do not expect brick and mortar to do for you as the senior pastor and your leadership team what only you are called and ordained to do as people. So don't expect your new property to do for you what your people should be doing. And that is, they ought to be motivated to attend church and to be actively involved in service, and as a part of their biblical stewardship, they ought to be developing and practicing generosity in giving. They ought to be doing this whether you have a brick and mortar or not. Just think, go across the ocean to a third world country that doesn't have brick and mortar. They're meeting under trees or in their houses. They don't have a nonprofit organization incorporated like we have it here in the States. Do you think they're going to build in order to get these three things? To increase these three things? I would say that it's a myth. So put credit where credit is due. While brick and mortar is very, very helpful, and it's difficult to move your ministry forward without it, it doesn't take the place of your leadership spiritually in your management of your ministry. Here are some motivations that you want to vet these motivations. We just dealt with one, and that is to increase your attendance. Well, if you're thinking somehow that you're going to increase attendance just by building, so you haven't done anything else, but you're thinking brick and mortar, that's a problem. Increase involvement, increase outreach, increase giving, increase unity. increase image, increase pride of the church. All of these are reasons that pastors and church leaders have given me over the years why they wanted to do it. Now, I'm going to give an analogy. It's somewhat like saying, well, you're going to strengthen a very weak marriage by having a baby. Now, you ought to be laughing right now, because a couple who is struggling in their relationship and struggling to obey Scripture and to have a healthy marriage is not going to solve their relationship problem by bringing in 1 or 2 kids. What are you going to do? You're going to increase the pressure and demands on that husband and wife. And now you've made them parents. So if you think for a moment that simply the solution to you obeying the Great Commission is to build so you can increase your attendance to your services, the involvement of God's people, the outreach to the lost, increase their generosity, bring them together and unify them, increase the image of the church in the community, and give your people pride about your ministry so they'll want to invite their friends, I think you're barking up the wrong tree. You need to get your thinking right. So here's a summary of what we're saying. If your reasons to build are wrong, if there's a better way to meet the space needs, and if you weaken your ministry, you ought not to build. So why not build? If your reasons are wrong, if you've got a better way to use the ministry space, you haven't maximized it, or if you're going to weaken your ministry in some way, then you should not build. All right, so there's 3 simple reasons why you ought to look and vet your ministry. If you weaken your ministry by money, by your manpower, and by your maintenance, if you weaken the way you use your money, it's outside of biblical instruction and biblical principles of money, or your manpower is weakened, or maintenance. That's why I told you that if you're going to be fit to build, to go through that big of a project, a building project, that you had better look and see if it all fits within your ministry design for the way you use your money. Are you going to put yourself in debt and obligate yourself to a debt for 20 years, 15 years, 30 years? You better look at how it indebts you with your money, with your manpower. If only 20% of your people are doing it, even if you get it up toward 45, you better be looking at 60, 65% of your people actively involved, because you're going to increase the square footage, which means you're going to have to increase the maintenance of the building, the manning power of that building, how many people it takes to take care of it and do ministry there. And if you don't have leaders and workers trained and motivated to serve, you're going to end up with a more square footage, and you're not going to have the money to take care of it, the manpower to serve it, and the maintenance to take care of it. So vet your plans to build by looking at the reasons why you want to do it, how you're currently stewarding your space, your square footage, your cubic square inches, your cubic square feet. And are you going to, if you're going to weaken your ministry in these 3 areas, then back off until you can come up with a plan that is in line. So here are motivations. A right motivation for a new building, in my thinking, a new facility will provide the congregation with a more effective tool for ministry, and it has to fit within your ministry design for the use of your money, your manpower, and the maintenance of the new building in your existing building. Secondly, a new facility should be a part of your ministry master plan to fulfill your calling as a church. It has to fit within God's will. And if you don't have a master plan for your ministry, where it's going, how it's going to get there, why it's doing what it's doing, then you need to back up before you ever go into some of these other areas and get that in order. And it's a process. We provide ministry master planning for churches. We'll help you go through that. Here's a warning. A facility is a tool, but it is powerless unless it is used in the hands of people with a clear purpose. You want to make certain that when you provide this building, this new ministry space, maybe on a new campus, that you have a clear reason why you're doing it, a clear purpose for it. So here's the rule. Don't ask your buildings to do for you what only you can do by your leadership. Now I'm going to help you here in the next couple of minutes to set up a framework for vetting your plans to build. First, you want to look at the mechanics. You need to do a code analysis. A code analysis will have an architect go thoroughly through the codes for your existing building and the current codes and what a new building will be required to meet as far as codes of whatever it is you're thinking you ought to build. An industry professional who is qualified to do it, probably an architect, will go through and do a code analysis. A land analysis is a code analysis of your property. You can have an architect or a civil engineer vet your building against the current codes to see mechanically if it is possible, if it's within the rules, or if you're going to have to get some variances, special permission, to build your next time on your property or on new property. I deal with churches who go buy new property and haven't done a code and land analysis of the new property, and then they come to find out after buying it that it isn't. You need to see our webinar on securing the right property for your ministry, selecting the right land. You need to look at, along with the mechanics, your ministry bandwidth, your money versus your needs. Think of a teeter-totter. You're going to balance out how much money you have, your capabilities, which preliminarily is discovered through doing 4 things. Here they are. Number 1, how much money do you have on hand, cash on hand? Plus, how much money can you borrow, which is 2 to 2.5 times your annual income, either your operating budget or your total income, depending upon the lender, plus how much money you can raise a capital stewardship campaign, which is 60% of your annual giving up to 2 times your annual giving, depending on whether you do the campaign in-house or with a consultant. Number 4, minus your debt. So cash on hand that you can put toward the project, plus what you can borrow, plus what you can raise, minus your existing debt. That will give you a number that ranges and it tells you how much you can afford. Now, just because you can afford it doesn't mean that's how God wants you to use the money. So you take and balance out what you should spend and can spend versus your ministry needs. So it's your money versus your ministry needs. You need to look and see by budgeting if you're able to do this. Now, here's a 6-part budget. If you're going to buy land, that's the 7th thing of the budget. But number 1 is you're going to have design costs. Architect, civil engineer, audiovisual lighting, interior design, and any number of other design costs that will come about in your building as you design the building. Number 2 is your site cost. This is everything outside the square footage of your facility. Your parking, your driveway, your detention or retention pond, your landscaping, ball fields, special lighting, your signage, it's your dumpster area, a pavilion, parking area for RVs, volleyball sand pits, soccer fields, baseball fields, softball fields, football fields, who knows what else you're going to do on your property. It's everything outside the confines of the structure. The next one is your building itself, the structure itself. And then your facilities, fixtures, and equipment, and maybe some extra things like your information technology that you need to put into this new building, that your FF and E and extras, we can call it. The next one is pre-construction costs. You've got to borrow money to build. If you have to borrow money, you're going to pay interest only. You may have some management fees. You may have some consulting fees. You might find that there are some other management things that go on that before you ever put a shovel in the ground, you've got some things that are outside of your design costs that are part of your pre-construction fees. You've got insurance to pay on your construction, builder's risk. These things come underneath pre-construction fees, and that's where you want to put them. And then you've got contingency. Contingencies are monies reserved, cash reserves set aside for unexpected, unplanned, unforeseen expenditures. We don't know exactly what yours are going to be, but you're planning in case you have overruns or something that's required that wasn't originally part of the planning, or who knows, they're unexpected and maybe unexplainable on the front end, but we know through years of doing this that you ought to have some margin where you reserve 3 to 5%, sometimes more. If you're doing a renovation, I'd tell you 10 to 15 and up of your total project cost to cover contingencies, unexpected expenditures. Well, you've got to look at this and vet your project by looking at your money and your ministry needs to see if you can get them to equal out. It is usually our wish list is much bigger than our wallet. That's my experience. Your manpower. If you're not up toward that 65%, you've got to look at what you're going to do in the new building and how many man hours is it going to take, how many workers is it going to take to do the work, to lead the work, to prepare for the work, to clean up after the work, to maintain the building. You've got to look at your money and your manpower. And so as a part of your ministry design, however it is you're doing ministry in this new building, you need to vet your manpower. Health versus fitness, we've already dealt with. You better be more than just healthy. You better be fit for the cause. Congregational buy-in. Just because you are convinced at the top of the organization as you lead the people, and you haven't communicated a clear vision and cause and a compelling reason for this new building, and they don't have a vision for what God is going to do when that building is done and how it's going to carry out your calling as a church, and you don't have congregational buy-in, you better delay or delete the project until you can look behind you as you're leading and see that your people are right up on top of you. They're right with you. So congregational buy-in. Then your context. And what I mean by that is this. If you build on your new building, your new location, and the community and the demographics and the psychographics, that you're losing your potential for market share, how many people you can reach and who you can reach and when you can reach them and how you can reach them, and your context tells you that in the next 5, 10, 12, 15 years, your ministry is going to diminish because you no longer have many bridges to the community, or the community is changing. So maybe the kind of building you ought to build changes, or the fact that you ought to build there or leave it and go start another campus in another area where your congregation has the capabilities, the bandwidth to reach out and effectively reach people with the gospel and grow them up into Christ-likeness, so you can in turn train them to repeat the process to reach their neighbors and grow them up in their relationship and service of Christ. So you've got to look at your context with this as well. Here are some mistakes that churches make when planning to build. Number one, They don't control their space dynamics. What I mean by that is when people walk into your auditorium, they normally, maybe naturally, I want to say, get an idea that God is either up to great things here, or maybe God is not doing so much here, that God's blessing your work and there's great things happening there spiritually, or that it isn't. And so, um, men like Gary McIntosh have put it this way. They've broken it down, and he didn't break it down exactly like this. These are mine. But if your building is less than 35% full, that is uncomfortably empty. If it's 35 to 50% full, that is comfortably empty. If it is 50 to 65% full, that is uncomfortably full. If it is 65 to 80% full, now that is uncomfortably full, and 80% up is now you got yourself a problem. That now really it's there's a discomfort with how full you are. You can develop your own measuring stick, but to control your space dynamics, and you need to survey newcomers to your church to see what their perception was of your space. How is it affecting them? And there's a whole science to it. But when you don't control your space dynamics, how full your building feels, the individual space in Sunday school, lobby, worship, fellowship, recreation, parking lot, on and on. You need to control it in such a way that it gives the right impression of what God is doing in your midst. You don't want to distract people, if I can put it that way, or hinder their spiritual advancement, progress, journey toward Christ or in Christ if they're saved, by not controlling your space dynamics. And then maximizing your space. I hardly, if ever, walk into a ministry, and I've been on thousands now of campuses, church campuses around the country, and on the foreign mission field, where they are not controlling their space dynamics and they're not maximizing their space. Almost always they can improve, sometimes drastically improve, the maximizing of their ministry space by how they have everything arranged. And this is not something that we're taught in undergraduate or seminary. We learn by working with the space as to how many chairs we can get in there without harming people coming back to worship, hurting our growth. So maximizing your space. Failure to understand your ministry design, failing to have a ministry design or a ministry master plan for your church, where you look at the why and how and the who and the when and the where and the what you are doing. To understand your ministry master plan, failure to understand it, so because it's that, you're getting the cart before the horse. If you don't have your ministry master plan, so you can answer the who, what, when, and where, and how of your ministry. If you need to be your ministry's architect to design how God wants you to fulfill your calling, your mission as a church, so you can fulfill your vision, God's vision for your church. Understanding your context. It is a real shame that the leadership of the average church in North America does not know the community and understand their context, as well as the Better Business Bureau or the Chamber of Commerce. And failure to plan long term. Your master plan for your property, for your campus, for your site, your location, it follows the master planning of your ministry. So what you're and how and when and where and so forth and who are going to do ministry on your property tells the architect how to master plan your your facility so that you have an order by which you think, as you look down the road, how your ministry will grow and how you're going to accommodate that growth and continue to provide the tool of brick and mortar to allow your church to prosper, to allow it to fulfill its calling. It's a tool. You're using it to further the cause of Christ. It is not the one that is propelling your growth. Your leadership and your ministry design and your shepherding your people and managing your people and leading them is going to bring about growth. But your building is there. So failure to plan long term, and I'm talking beyond 6 months, a year, and 2 years, and 3 years, but to look out to see how you might use it. Now, having said that, every time that you go to build again on your property, you need to revisit your master plan and your ministry design to see if anything needs to change. We live in a place where our country has changed a great deal in the last 50 years. So failure to long-term planning is a mistake. Failure to utilize other options, such as multi-use. The days of dedicated space that is used just for this Sunday school class or this small group or this fellowship or this worship service or this ministry, that really, we've been pushed out of that because it's too expensive to provide dedicated space where the people who use it can just lock the door and no one else is going to be in that ministry space until they use it the next time. So multi-use. You ought to use the same square footage over and over and over and over and over again. At least consider it. Other locations. You may have a closed circuit in another part of your facility that is worshiping in another space, and they're watching you on a projector screen off the wall or a big TV monitor of some kind. It could be off campus that this is happening. It could be them watching you on their computer. So you're finding a way. You could do a small addition. So failure to utilize other options other than just, well, our worship is full. We're just going to have to go build more worship space, and we don't look at the other options. So let me run down just a list for you, and I'll put this, I'm going to write all these down. I'm going to give them to you in our resource file on our website, ministrydesigntraining.com, so you can download this. But let me just run through some of these. Number one, when your Sunday morning service is full, you can add a second Sunday morning service. If you're traditional, still having Sunday school, you can stick the Sunday school in between the two Sunday morning services. Number two, you can add a second service and flip-flop the Sunday schools, meaning while you're worshiping in the first service at 9 o'clock, you also have 9 o'clock Sunday school. Now, you better vet your bandwidth of your manpower. See if you've got workers and teachers and security groups and so forth and so on, cleaning crews and so forth that can take care of those two Sunday schools. Number three, add a second service at the same time as the regular morning service and do it in several ways. So you're meeting in your auditorium, your sanctuary, whatever you're calling it, your worship space. And at the same time, you've got a worship service going on in the fellowship hall or a very large classroom. And you're maybe providing a separate worship leader, song leader, and instrumentalist, and ushers and greeters, and a preacher. And maybe you're assigning Sunday school classes to rotate through it, so it's not the same people all the time. But this is an option. The fourth option is an overflow service with a video feed. Now, I've done this in several ways. You can provide a song leader and an MC for the overflow service and only turn the video on for the preaching, or you can do the whole service by video, or any number of combinations there. So you can use any number of options in that situation. Number five, You can just find a larger meeting room on your existing site other than your auditorium sanctuary, your worship space, and move your main service there to increase attendance. In other words, find a bigger box and fill it up. You could find, number 6, a larger meeting place off campus and move your whole worship service there. And you're renting space. Number 7, you can start a satellite church off campus. You can multi-venue. Start a second service off campus in a storefront, in a warehouse, in a built-out commercial space of some kind. And so you're one church in a couple of locations. But that's an option that's being used today, and successfully. If you have to, and it's the last option I have written down here that I'll give you, is to start a Saturday evening service with multiple services Sunday morning and Sunday afternoon and Sunday night. But the point is, you're using the square footage, you're optimizing, you're maximizing the use of the square footage. And so you want to look at these options. So here's what we're going to tell you to do. To modify your existing ministry space, to maximize it, you want to modify it by identifying the maintenance needs. Maybe your property is older and you need to identify how to maintain it and improve it, and then do some modernization. You want to identify what needs to be maintained better, what needs to be brought up to speed, up to grade, to improve it, to modernize it. And it can be your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, your infrastructure of your IT. Take your pick, but you want to bring the building up to speed, up to modern times with it. You want to master plan your existing site with several things, with your programming, with a feasibility study. So your programming is how many people you've got and how are they arranged and when are they arranged. It's counting your programming needs. It's how and what and where you do ministry. Then doing a feasibility study, and we can help you with this, but you want to see what's possible within your money and your ministry space. I think I'll give you also a square footage per person for the different age groups, and then you'll have to do some specialization and contextualization of that rule of thumb sheet to be able to figure out how are you going to use every ministry space. Because let's say you're having a Sunday school room, well, you may put them in a classroom setting, you may put them at tables round a rectangle, or you may put them in a circle or a square around the room. You may have the kids sit on carpet on the floor on, mats. And so depending on what your method of communication or education is in that classroom, it affects how many people per square foot you can get in the room. A feasibility study will give you an overview of what's possible. So it's balancing your wallet and your ministry needs together. That's what a feasibility study does. You then want to master plan it with action steps. Where do you go from here? What do you do first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh? What do you do linearly? What do you do together? Several things being done at the same time. So you want to also create a budget and a process, and then implement and monitor the plan. So let's say that you're going to use your educational space, and you're vetting your educational space, you're examining it, evaluating it, trying to perfect it and modify it so that you can get more students in the space while enhancing what you're trying to do with those students, evangelize them, edify them, equip them, or maybe engage them in ministry. It's a training ground for service. Whatever you're doing in that educational space, as you're educating them, that you want to implement it, and then you want to monitor it to see how your plan is working. So don't just start it and leave it. Don't just wind it up and let it go. Monitor it and make adjustments to the plan. So you ought to maximize and steward the space God has already entrusted to you, so that you can say, Lord, I know I'm being a good steward. I know I'm using every cubic inch of our campus correctly. I know that we're using it the best we can within our context, within our personal situation. Well, I want to thank you for listening today. Again, I'm Marshall Shannon, your pre-construction navigator with Ministry Design Training and Ministry Design Concepts. You can reach us by phone at our office at this number, or at this number on my cell phone. It's my desire that you would delay a plan to build if it's not God's will. So how do you determine if it's not God's will? Well, you do what you're supposed to do, and I know God's going to do what He's supposed to do, so that you go to James 1:5 and ask Him for wisdom about your need to add ministry space. We'll first look at how you're using your existing ministry space, and how might you change your ministry design or your current space to accommodate your ministry so you can further the cause of Christ as you are called to do it in your ministry there. Lord bless you as you move your ministry ahead for the Lord.